Okay, Herman, I think that's everybody right now. We are being recorded, so just that's a heads up for everybody. And once again, if you want Herman to be in your full screen view, the icon on the top right hand corner called view, just put it in speaker view and you'll get the greenhouse tour in full screen. So take it away, Herman.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, so for those of you that aren't familiar with our farm, we've been farming here for this is going to be our 28th season. Yeah, 28th season, and yeah, so Louise and I started it just the two of us, thinking that, oh yeah, we're going to have a little small farm, and it just kind of gradually grew from there, and you know, kind of got out of control, and eventually, you know, got to be to the point where we're on, well, we've always been on 20 acres. We rent another 4, so we're basically working on 24 acres, but we only crop about half of that in any given year, and then the other half is in a green manure, resting the soil and building soil organic matter and nutrients. So yeah, we just started off. The very first greenhouse that we built was basically just a little 10 by 10 uh, square, and it had a wood stove in it. It was built out of, basically, I was still building our house actually at the same time. Louise was just starting a few plants, and it was built out of scraps from our house building project, and some, you know, for plastic we just used vapor barrier that we had left over from our house, and the frame was just a plastic tubing, like the white plastic tubing that you use for water lines. And yeah, that survived. I think we did use that for 2 seasons, and then you know, built a bigger version after that. But one of the things that happened to us fairly early on is that another farmer in Armstrong, Pilgrim's Produce, it was Robert and Catherine Hetler. Some of you may know that or recognize that name as well. Um, anyway, Robert, I was over at Robert's one day, and he said to me, you know, you really should try putting up some unheated greenhouses, just to give you an extra earlier start on some of your crops. And yeah, at the time we didn't have any, and then he even went so far to say, well, you know, I've got an old one here, and that I built myself out of just electrical conduit, metal electrical conduit, and you can have it because I've just bought a new one and I don't need this one anymore. So that was sort of the start of a process where we then took that home, those pieces, and built built it, put a greenhouse together out of it. It was kind of a bit of a rickety one, but it worked for a few years, and we realized right away that the immense advantage just an unheated structure like that gives you, in terms of being able to get things together much earlier, especially for us. We our soil is quite heavy and high clay content, and in the spring it takes forever usually to dry out and get to the point where we can work it outside. But by having a a, a structure that was keeping the snow off and then warming up the soil earlier, we could easily get 3 weeks earlier, really, without any heat and just a structure like that. So once we realized that, what an immense advantage that gives us, because getting onto the market early is the name of the game in the spring. You really want to have things. Everyone's really super keen to buy whatever they can get, when there's, you know, in the spring when there's not a lot available. So yeah, we realized that was something that really worked. And so then after that, every year at the end of the year, we would take uh, whatever money we had and buy another one. So we started buying 20-foot by 100, 20 by 100-foot greenhouses, or they're actually called high tunnels, or some people call them cold frames as well. So I'll be showing you some of these. We ended up doing about a dozen of them, just one every year, until we kind of ran out of space and don't have room for any more. But those 12 really do give us a lot of options to grow things and get things going earlier. But the first thing I'd like to show you, I guess, is to start off with is our seedling house, and I think a lot of you are interested in that. I'm just going to see if I can find Louise, because she's the one that's sort of in charge of that and does most of that, and then she can give us a tour of that. Let's see if I can find her. So here you can see actually the row of all the different houses. We got them kind of all lined up in along both sides of a sort of access pathway. And yeah, so Louise is actually here. We're just doing some transplanting in one of these houses. This is a large one we have. It's a 30-foot. It's the only 30-foot we have. And yeah, we're just planting things in there, and you can see the soil is really nice and ready to go. And what are you planting? Salad turnips. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, so you can see just laying out the salad turnips here, and actually we'll be laying them out and then planting them. And we have next to it here spinach. So we do some early spinach transplanting just to kind of be able to get spinach even earlier. Same with over here, we've got some lettuce transplants, just to, lettuce mix. So we'll just, this will kind of grow into a solid row, and then we'll just harvest it in a mix and put it in and sell it in bags. We've got kohlrabi coming up already here, transplanted in just a few days ago. And chard, a bed of chard, and also transplanted some red Russian kale here as well. So there's a bunch of crops just in this one house right here, and they'll just grow that much faster. And in a normal year, we wouldn't even be able to plant anything outside yet. So because the soil would be wet for another 2 weeks. This year, it's just unusually dry, so the greenhouses don't give us quite the advantage. Louise, can we go and do the tour of the transplant greenhouse, seedling greenhouse? Great. So for anyone in the call, just to, I forgot to mention that as you, feel free to jump in and if there's something that you see and you don't understand, or something that I say that you want some more information on, definitely just ask, and we'll try to fit it in, because as much as we can, we want this tour is for you to find out things, and I don't necessarily know what would be the most interesting for you. So definitely feel free to ask as questions as they come up. And every now and then I'll pause to ask if there's any questions, but feel free to just interrupt too. So this is just the peek inside our seedling house. So this is Louise's domain, and basically the schedule for planting on the whole farm starts off right here, in terms of making sure you've got generations of kohlrabi and all the different greens and plants and things like that you need for outside. It all starts right here. Yeah, so what you're seeing in the middle here, you might be wondering, why do we have this? Actually, I'll just back up a little bit, because I'll show you that the heat source is for our greenhouse is an oil furnace, and that oil furnace is actually underneath the middle bench. So we've got 3 benches, one on the outside here where Louise is watering, then a large one in the middle here, and then another one on the outside. Anyway, the middle bench is set up so that the heat is underneath it. That helps plants get established and germinate actually and grow. It's nice. Lots of plants like the heat at their roots, and so they just do so much better. So that's why we wanted to have heat underneath and not have to have water or some people use heat benches to kind of get things going, like electrical heat benches. What we decided to do is just put the entire furnace. We bought a new furnace, so we got one that you can actually put on its side and shove underneath the bench so that it's under there. And then we have plastic along the edges so that the heat stays underneath. And then the heat goes right to the very end and comes up at the end. And then when we're at night, we close this plastic will just drop down to the edge here, and it becomes a greenhouse within a greenhouse. So basically, we're just heating this greenhouse. The air comes up from the back here and then goes back around to the furnace and circulates just inside here. It doesn't go out here at all, except for what should just kind of leaks through. So one thing that an advantage that gives us is that it really reduces the amount of heat we have to or use to heat. We don't have to heat this whole greenhouse, right? We're just heating this little one right in here. And the plants are getting the heat at their roots where they really want it. So that's something that is a really easy thing to do, relatively easy. And then we're just about ready now where we're going to take this whole, these are just like this plastic stuff that I was telling you about that we built our first greenhouse out of. And they're just sitting in here. We can just pop them out and take them apart. You can see there's, you look up here, there's just little cross pieces, and that can all come apart, and we take the plastic off, and then we have one big greenhouse, just like every other, most other greenhouses. So that's sort of a, yeah, it's just a way to really reduce your energy costs and still get the benefit of the greenhouse part for the plants that need it. And as plants get bigger and they don't really need the heat, we move them out here to the outside bench, and they'll just they won't have that heat under their roots. Any questions on that before I move on? I'm hoping that I'm making that describing that in a way that is understandable, but it's just a really neat way of conserving energy and getting the heat where you need it.
Herman, I had a question. This is Rachel. Do you find that the heat, like you have to switch the plants or rotate them around because it's hotter at one end than the other?
No, it's not. It works really well. It seems to work really well that the airflow is really good underneath the table. So it just, any warm air just blasts the entire length of the table. So the furnace is at that end, and it just blows down here and comes up in this area at the end, and then goes all the way back across the top. So in actual fact, the air temperature, like we generally want our soil temperature to be around 20. So if you look at our soil thermometer there, it's just over 20 right now.
Okay.
The sun's shining on it. But at night, so I'll just turn it there. Yeah, it's a bit easier to see. At night, we want the soil temperature to be around 20, but the air temperature is more like around 15. But because most of the heat is underneath the bench, and it's evenly distributed underneath the bench because the furnace will be blowing it under there, it doesn't matter so much what the air temperature is. So we save heat that way too, in that the air temperature is actually lower inside the tent, and then of course out here we're not heating this whole outside area at all. So we're only heating a small fraction in the early spring when we're just starting. Now, as we get, as we have more plants than we can fit under here, and the temperatures, just the overnight temperature is warmer, we can definitely get away without having this whole inner greenhouse at all, and we'll just take it apart and put it away.
Great. No, that's interesting. And it's neat to see your soil thermometer there, that's the way you're monitoring like your
it's
environment.
a good way to keep track of, okay, what is the actual soil temperature? Because air temperature isn't so significant. The soil temperature is more significant than air temperature. And often if you're heating from above, like you're just heating your greenhouse in a normal way, in that you're just heating the air, you have to bring your air temperature quite a bit higher than 20 to get a soil temperature of 20, especially along the edges here. And so that's why it works so well, and you can save yourself a lot of energy by having your heat source underneath the plants. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll just take a quick look here at Louise's seeding technique. Do you want to say what you're talking about, what you're seeding, Louise, and how you're doing it?
I'm seeding kohlrabi right now.
So that would be your.
And I'm doing it in these 128 plugs. And I make it just a really shallow depression with my fingers and then just drop 1 or 2 seeds in.
I'll get it from this side because you can see it a little bit better.
I don't use any fancy seeding little gadgets. I just use my fingers. And I just roll the seeds between my thumb and forefinger and control how many drop in that way.
Yeah, so this would be already the second or third generation of kohlrabi?
Third.
Third generation, yeah. So the first one we saw transplanted in that large greenhouse. The second one is in here, still growing, and it'll be probably transplanted outside in a couple of weeks. And then
about a week.
Yeah, and then this will be the third one. So this is one thing that's really key, of course, when you're most market gardeners will know this, that you really want to have multiple generations of all your crops, as many generations as you can, so you can have a continuous supply from the earliest ones in the greenhouse to multiple generations outside to the very latest, might even end up in the greenhouse towards the end. So what you're doing there is just sort of closing some soil over the seeds again, right?
Yeah, and then I push down on the one that I've done to sort of firm the soil a little bit, sink them in.
Yeah.
Before going on to the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, kohlrabi gets seeded every 3 weeks, I guess.
Yeah, and lots of other things get seeded even more, like lettuce, even more frequently than that.
Lettuce probably every week to 10 days.
Yeah. And
yeah, but all the brassicas are more like every 3 weeks to a month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably every.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have a schedule that we're going off of, but a lot of it is also just in Louise's head too. But we are trying to get it written down so that other people can refer to it.
Oh, I have a question. This is Sharon.
Yeah.
I noticed your germination rate is just phenomenal. I have problems with germination. What's your secret?
Well, it's probably the fact that we have a pretty consistent temperature, all because of the heat bench setup that we have that Herman was just describing. The temperature is pretty consistently around 20 degrees day and night in here. We're on the germinating bench. I think that's really important for good germination. Your potting mix could have something to do with it. And then the other factor is water. I mean, everybody knows that you have to water, but sometimes you can end up overwatering, and then that means that the seeds don't get enough. They get too saturated, or they don't have enough air, and that can affect germination.
The other thing is water. Do you use warm water or do you use regular water?
No, I don't, because I just find it too awkward to have to heat water seedlings when there's so many. So I just use water out of the hose. So it is pretty cold, but I think, so they might get a little bit of a shock when they first get watered, but I think the soil temperature comes back up to 20 pretty quick after they get watered with the way the heat system works in here.
Right. And average, how long would you hold them on the germinating bench?
Well, some of the stuff grows the entire time on this bench.
Oh, okay.
Some of the heat, the more heat-loving crops like basil, for example, I would probably keep on here the whole time. But
cucumbers.
And then
tomatoes.
The onions I moved out just recently because they don't need the heat anymore once they're up and running. And yeah, most things I would probably keep until they're fairly well established before moving them off.
Thank you.
Just while we're on the subject of soil mix, this is we get ours. We don't make our own mix, so we buy it from Sungrow. And let me just see if I can get this bag up here. So anyone want to look at it? This is the we're using organics, an organic mix, and it's the Sungrow mix #1, and it's allowed for organic growers. So that's basically all we're using. You're not adding anything to it for
No,
most things, right?
For things that are going to be in the plugs for longer, like say broccoli, cauliflower, the brassicas, and even lettuce heads, and when I'm potting up tomatoes or bigger plants like that, then I add compost to this mix.
Okay.
And I add it at a rate usually of 2 5-gallon buckets of our own, well, it's actually composted chicken manure that we have in supply here. I'll add 2 buckets of compost per bale of peat moss.
2 20-liter buckets.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to just demonstrate your technique for filling trays? Or?
Yeah, I don't have much soil on the ready to go on here.
Okay.
Right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's not really much.
So this is Louise's sort of potting bench where she does all her, gets her trays filled and gets them ready for seeding. And then she does the seeding like you saw earlier. So just sort of fills them up like that.
And then I usually give it a little tap to make sure they're all full before.
Yeah.
That's about all there is to it. Just pile it on there and then smooth it off.
Yeah. And then just before you plant, you're using your fingers to make little holes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we'll go back and take a look at that in a second here. As soon as you're... Anyway, this is basically just a an old produce table that we got from a grocery store or something like that. It's stainless steel, and then we put a plywood back behind it so that we could kind of pile the soil up in the corner in there, and we can put a bale or 2 on at a time, and then use it to also mix in some compost. And yeah, it works as a pretty good potting bench. And then
I have a couple of questions.
Sure, yeah.
You can hear me. Do you find that you need to sift that stuff? Because sometimes I find there's big twigs and things in there, but
yeah, there are some chunks of wood in there, but I don't sift it. I just as I come across them, I just pick them out and throw them in a bucket.
Yeah, here's a bucket.
oh yeah. Also, are you watering with any kind of nutrients for the seedlings, or just straight up water?
I don't use any nutrients on the seedlings. I find that with a little bit of compost in the mix, it's usually enough to carry the seedlings through to the point where they need to be transplanted.
Oh.
It's possible that I would have better results if I mix some fish fertilizer in, but for the amount of time it takes to do all that mixing of stuff, and then I don't have an application system. I'd have to do it all in watering cans, and in order to, like, I have experimented with that before, and the results for me weren't enough to warrant the extra time.
Right.
But I guess if you had some fancy system where you could kind of, if you had like an automated watering system and you could feed the nutrients into your line somehow. I know some greenhouses do that, and that would be cool to try, but yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Well, and most of our transplants don't have to stay around for very long, right? They do. They're in their plugs for 6 weeks, and then they're out in the field. Or
3 to 6 weeks at the most.
Yeah, 3 to 6 weeks. So they don't have to be there for very long. They just need to get established and get ready to go, and then we're putting them out. I think it would be different if you're doing flowering pots of flowering plants where you're expecting them to actually flower right in, in the pot. We're not expecting that.
And Herman, just to belabor like the nutrient management for the seedlings, and Louise saying that she does add composted chicken manure in a ratio to the grow mix.
Yeah.
You do that just for the plants that you're potting up, like tomatoes?
Yeah, for those as well
cucumbers.
as some brassicas. We find that brassicas do better. I'm just going to show you some of the compost. So this is chicken manure compost that we buy, composted chicken manure, and we do sift this actually. So we just run this across the screen just so that we get any kind of chunks out of that, so that it's just perfect for mixing in with the soil, and it's really nice stuff. No smell, completely composted, and yeah, nice consistent quality all the time. So we'll just sift a bunch of it into a couple of apple bins, and that's probably more than enough for a couple of seasons. Even we probably go through one of these apple bins a season. Yeah, so that's about all we do. And yeah, Louise, you can maybe we'll just ask Louise one more time to explain exactly where she puts.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful because like when I think about seedling starting, I think, okay, that potting mix doesn't have much nutrients, but that's sort of okay to get seedlings going. They're like, 4 to 6 weeks perhaps, but then beyond that, they need a little bit of food to thrive and survive, especially if you're growing plants larger, like a cucumber or something.
Yeah, for sure. That's what, and that for us, that's what the compost does. It provides that extra boost for the plants that are going to be in there for longer, or that are being potted up.
Yeah, but the brassicas you're not potting up, and they're
getting the compost in the
they
mix,
get it
so
as well. Yeah.
I think plug size makes a huge difference too. Like if you want to have bigger plants and hold them for longer, just use a bigger plug size.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you do, sometimes I'll do my brassicas in 1/28, and then they won't grow all that big, but I'll just move them out into the field sooner, and they'll start growing fast as soon as they're transplanted. But if you want to have like a really big beefy cabbage plant or broccoli plant to put out in the field, put it in a 98 plug size, and you'll get bigger plants. You don't necessarily have to add more nutrients. You just have to give them a bigger soil plug, and they'll grow bigger.
Mm-hmm. And everyone just saw you doing your watering, and I might just take this opportunity. So what we've done is we have a watering hose. Do you want to just demonstrate, moving it to another, plugging it into another one? Yeah, so there's a line underneath the bench here, and every so many 20 feet or so, we have a quick connect here, so we can just take this little hose that Louise has and take it and move it that way to another one and plug it in, and that way we don't have to drag long hoses around the greenhouse to do our watering. So she just shoves it in, and there it is, ready to go over here. And yeah, all the watering gets done by hand. We find that we've thought about creating an automatic watering system, but there's just so much variation, and you need to be able to, between different sizes of plants and different species of plants, that you just need to have someone look, you use your own eyes and make your own judgment on what has to be watered, and you can't just water everything the same, because obviously a little plant like this isn't going to use anywhere near the same amount of water as something like these ones over here that are much larger.
Herman, were those peas we just saw?
Yeah, actually, yeah. So we do, just to kind of get some earlier peas, we germinate some indoors and transplant them. Just a way of kind of getting a quicker.
And those are actually going to go into into one of the hoop houses. Along like 2 rows along either wall of a hoop house. And then we actually fence them. Well, it's going to be a movable house, so they'll start inside, and then the house is going to get moved off them, and then we can put a fence in them, and so they get a really early start that way.
Okay, wow, that's impressive, guys.
Yeah, so
Um,
we're always
yeah.
looking for ways of kind of getting a little extra jump on things, right? So
Yeah,
we use
that's a
all kinds of
jump.
different tricks. And the other thing is, as well, sometimes peas don't germinate very well in the early spring, especially if the soil is still cold. So that
Oh, Herman, I think you pressed mute by accident. We can't hear you.
right about that.
So there's actually 3 or 4 seeds planted in each little plug, and that way you plant them out in groups like that, not individual plants, every few inches apart.
Yeah.
And it works quite well. They transplant pretty well. We've tried it with beans too, though, and beans do not seem to transplant well. They go through too much of a transplant shock if you try to move them, and we haven't had much success with that.
Yeah, so you try these things, you always try to think of something, oh, we need to make it even, get a little even earlier, another week earlier kind of thing.
Yeah. And yeah, maybe you could run us through what's on your table here, because I can see you have quite a variety of different crops already started in different life stages.
Okay, so I missed part of it because my phone was doing something, but you're asking us to kind of go through and look at all the different plants that we have.
Yeah, and just when you started it. Yeah, what you're growing
yeah.
and when you started it.
Okay, great. Yeah, Louise, do you want to do start over here? Yeah.
Okay. Well, these are the peppers, and they were seeded on February 27th. And actually, normally I would seed these in flats and then prick them out into plugs, and then from the plugs transfer them into pots. But this time I direct seeded them into plugs. I skipped the stage where they're in broadcast in flat. And they seem to be doing about the same. They're just about ready to be potted up into the 4-inch pot. So that's February 27th. So we are, those are already like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Or more along, right?
Yeah.
I have a question on peppers.
Sure.
Whenever I handle my peppers, transplant them, they tend to pout and sit there.
Yeah, so that's why I decided to do them direct seeded into these plugs this time, because now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, when I go to pot them up, I'm going to pull out a plug and just plop it into a bigger pot, and there's less disturbance of the roots than when you tease them out and have to, from a flat, and have to move them. So I think this will probably work better, but we'll find out. But I have noticed it's hit and miss. Some of them transplant really well when I've done it the old way, and others aren't happy. There's always a few that pout, like you say. This is celery that was seeded on March 9th. And this I seed in flats, and then I prick them out. They've just recently been pricked out and put into plugs.
Let's skip these little ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are the cucumbers seeded on March 26th. So those are what? They're only 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're pretty big for 2 weeks.
Yeah. They're enjoying their life in the heated tent, obviously. Here we got some, this is my second planting of broccoli or cauliflower, I guess. That was March 31st. So they're only just over a week. Here's a second seeding of celery just coming up. Seeded March 24th. So celery takes a long time to germinate. So these are already like almost 2 weeks old.
Seed the same day as the cucumbers.
Yeah.
What a difference. Cucumbers over there.
Yeah. That's
celery over here.
Really slow growing.
So you're going to prick those out and put them into plug trays later on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll skip over those.
Eggplant.
Okay.
And that's what I did. Well, you can look at the onions here.
Okay, we'll look at the onions on the other side.
Onions were seeded on March 2nd. And they're some of them are doing better than others. This particular variety called Patterson, it's a yellow storage onion, is doing really well.
And
I
here's,
always have germination issues with some of my onion and leek varieties, but
do you want to talk a little bit briefly how you seed these and how we'll transplant them?
well, they're just seeded in flats, and I do like 8 rows across in a flat, and I just make shallow little troughs with my fingers and sprinkle the seeds in, and then lightly cover them and tamp it down, and then
And then they'll stay in those flats until we take them out to the field, and then we'll pull them apart individually and trim the roots and the tops a little bit.
yeah,
And
they get haircuts before they get transplanted.
yeah, and then we transplant them individually into the ground at 4 inches apart in a row.
So the onions are just over a month old now, and that's what they look like.
Should we just do this one here?
No, there's not much to see there. That's just some bunching onion.
Okay. All right, going around to the other side of the greenhouse here. More onions and leeks. Actually, these are mostly
Yeah,
leeks.
these are leeks.
Yeah. Same
Leeks
same
are-
strategy with the planting as onions.
Leeks are
Rows.
painfully slow growing, but they'll take off eventually.
Yeah.
They were seeded February 28th. Um,
Lettuce.
This is the second planting of lettuce, March 19th. So it's about 3 weeks. Yeah, close to 3 weeks old now. And so this, the first planting is going in a greenhouse. These ones will probably end up going outside, because if we were having a late spring, I might put the second planting in one of our tunnels or our unheated greenhouses as well. But I think this year, with it being so early, they can go right outside.
What about this here?
These are beets, which have kind of spotty germination, but I always have a hard time getting consistent germination with beets direct seeded or seeded in the greenhouse. But at least this way, I know which ones didn't germinate, and I can even out the gaps when I transplant them. This is the first seeding of broccoli, which was done on March 22nd. And so I was counting on about a month from seeding to transplanting. So, but maybe even sooner. By the middle of April, we'll be putting those outside.
For your cucumbers,
Yeah.
will those be going into a heated tunnel or unheated?
Oh, sorry.
No.
No, unheated tunnel. Yeah, but
Unheated, okay.
They'll be grown all under cover, but
Right.
they'll be transplanted sometime in beginning of May, probably, into the unheated tunnel. And then I'll just show you here. This is basil, which I seed for pots. So there's like a cluster of plants in each little plug. And then later on, I pull those out and I put several of them into a little pot, and then we sell them at the market. When, after they're about that high, then we'll be taking them to the market and selling the little basil pots. People like to buy them that way, and they either plant them in their gardens, or you can even just keep them in their kitchen on the windowsill. And
Yeah, the first generations,
use
they
it for
definitely just
garnish.
want to keep in the kitchen because it'll be way
Yeah.
too cold. We'll have them in the market in May and they won't want to go outside just yet.
And then this is all Celeriac, and these are just about ready to prick out from the flats, and they'll be moved into the 98 plug cells sometime in the next week.
And they were seeded. They're quite long,
March
slow growing,
9th.
slow growing as well. Yeah.
So they're about a month old now and just about ready to be moved.
Celeriac is also called celery root for those of you that are not familiar with it. Tomatoes. Should we talk? Just
Yeah, the crazy tomatoes that always seem to grow too fast. They're getting really leggy already. These need to be, these were seeded in flats, pricked out into plugs. And then once they filled out these, they're in 72 plugs. Once they filled out these plugs, then they're going to be potted up into 4-inch pots.
Yeah.
And then from there, they'll go into one of the unheated greenhouses into the soil. And they were seeded on March 8th. So they're a month old.
I'll show you another little look at them right here.
How many varieties of tomatoes do you start?
Probably about 10. And most of them are cherry tomatoes. A lot of different cherry
And we
tomatoes.
start them right here. Actually, those are leftovers, right, Louise?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were started in these trays and then just pricked out from these. So she just starts them in, 4 rows to a tray and then just grabs them from there and sticks them into the plug trays that we have here.
About how many seeds do you start in that initial phase when you're just starting them in those broad flats? It looks like, a lot.
Yeah, there's 4 rows usually in a flat. I make 4 channels lengthwise in each flat, and there's probably about 100 to 150 seeds in each row.
And there's what, four flats
So
too.
maybe 500 or so per flat.
Yeah. And we're doing 4 of them, so that's a couple thousand. Yeah, so I think that's it for plants. We're hitting the empty spots here. Yeah. One thing I can just show you while we're standing here is, you might be wondering what this is, but what we're doing is we're pre-sprouting our potato tubers prior to planting them. So we're just going to let them sit in the greenhouse, warm up, and grow little sprouts. And then in about a couple weeks, we'll plant them, and they'll be kind of just ready. They'll get a quicker start that way. So yeah, we've got about probably 1,000 pounds of potatoes lined up underneath the benches here, and happily growing some sprouts for us, hopefully. Louise, do you want to show do you want to just show how you're doing the pricking out in case people want to see that, or is that too much trouble right now?
Well, I would have to set up the tree.
Okay, Louise is just going to set up a trail. Did you have a question, or was that Rachel, or?
I have a question. It's Angela.
Okay.
Have you found a watering wand that lasts more than a season?
Yeah, well, they don't last very long. They last
No.
more than a season, though. What is that one that we have there? I don't even know what brand it is.
Yeah, well, I'll go take a look while you're filling the tray.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, they are such cheap things, aren't they?
They are. I want to pay more, but
it's irritating that they build them so crappily. Okay, yeah, we're using a dram.
okay.
Yeah, and
That's the one I have, and it failed me too.
Yeah, I know, they just don't last very long. And then also the nozzle, we like to use this one, the yellow one. It's just has the right amount of flow, but there are several different kinds. If you have bigger plants, you could use one with a bit more flow. Then there's also these fogging nozzles. I'm sure you're aware of them as well, where I'll just show you here. I think we have them here. Yeah, so we have ones with bigger holes, so you can get more water coming through if you need to. Do you have any of the misting? Oh, here's one. So this is like a misting one if you really wanted to put the water on very slowly or carefully, but you don't tend to use this much anymore, eh, Louise? You're mostly just using the yellow one.
Maybe for something like celery, where the seeds are planted so shallow that they're practically sitting on the top.
Yeah.
You might miss them first.
Yeah. So we use it fairly rarely, actually, but it just sends out a really fine mist. So mostly this yellow one here. Yeah, so let me just see if I can get a good angle on how you're doing this, just so that people can see your technique, please. So you pulled out a few bunches of, what is that? This is celery or celeriac, right?
Celeriac. I pulled out
Okay.
of here.
Yeah.
So I just well, I can show it. It's pretty straightforward. I just pull out a cluster and then I'll kind of knock most of the soil off. And then if there's some extra dangly roots, I'll just give them a trim, because what you don't want your roots to be doing a U-turn when you put them in. So if they're super dangly, I'll pinch a little bit off just so that they're no longer than the depth of my cells. And then yeah, I just I use a disposable chopstick, which I have a collection of, and I just kind of shove it in there. I aim the chopstick at the sort of at the base of the root, so I'm kind of feeding it down like that. And I give it a little squeeze after it's in to make sure it's standing upright. But
Whoops. Just trying to get into a position where I can show how you're doing it. There we are. Can everyone see that?
I'm not too gentle with them. I'm just
Yeah, no, it's a really good angle, and it's actually really great to see that you're not too gentle, because I think, I think about doing this and I was thinking it might be so finicky. So it's helpful to see the hands-on demo here. And you're a pro, Louise. Look at you go. Tray's almost half
well,
full.
I think an important aspect is you don't want to have wet, soggy, dense soil. You want to have you want your soil to be nice and light. Because if it wasn't nice and light, you wouldn't be able to do this. You'd end up breaking the roots off. But as long as they're going into a soft bed, you can just shove them in like that with the chopstick and it doesn't do them any harm. So you wouldn't want to, I don't pre-wet my soil when I work with it. Unless it's super dry, then sometimes as I'm mixing it, I'll add like a watering can full of water to the soil mix before I mix it up. But often I just work with it the way it comes out of the bale, and then I water afterwards. Because if you're trying to, especially something like this, if this would not work if you were trying to do it in wet, sticky soil. It would take way longer.
Yeah, and you're gonna have to do, how many celeriac trays are you gonna do?
I'm gonna have to do 30 of these.
So that's
We
30,
need 3,000 plants.
3,000.
These are 98 plugs, so yeah.
Yeah, at least 3,000. I thought we did more than that even. But anyway,
No, I think that's
okay. Yeah. So you get into, after you've done that many, you get pretty good at it. Because you got to get the job done, right? Yeah.
Well, good job, Louise. That's a lot of transplanting to do, but fascinating to see.
I'm hoping I'll get some help with it from one of our employees.
Yeah, that's been a bit of a challenge. I was talking to Rachel about it earlier too, is that generally we like to hire a greenhouse lead to take on some of this managing all these 12 unheated houses and a lot of this transplant production, and be sort of that would be their focus. But this year it's been really difficult. We've just haven't had much luck and haven't been able to find anyone that wants to do the job. So if you know of anyone, get them to go to our website and look at the job description and get in touch with us, because we're still trying to fill that position. And they'd be working with Louise and learning her techniques.
And Herman,
Anyway.
I had one last question about the temperatures and starting the lettuces specifically.
Yeah.
Do you run into challenges as the weather gets warmer on starting your lettuces? Because they don't like germinating in particularly warm temperatures, do they?
Yeah, so yeah, of course. Yeah, that's a really good question, because that leads me to talk about something I might not have even thought about talking about at this time of year. But as it gets warmer, we have shade cloth that we throw over this whole house, so that that makes a dramatic difference to the temperature inside the house. So we reduce the temperature by putting a shade cloth over it, and that'll help with the germination. But if we still sometimes do get some problems with germination, right, Louise? Or-
Yeah, like two things that I've really had troubles with if they get too hot is lettuce, and then later in the year when we seed our corn salad, it doesn't like it to be too hot. So occasionally,
Oh, Herman, I think you're muted again. Herman, you're muted.
Mute. There.
Oh, now you're good. You're good now.
There. Okay. Sorry.
okay, yeah, I
I don't know how that
I
happened.
was just saying that like normally the shade cloth is enough to keep it temperate in here, but if we're having a real heat wave in the middle of the summer, I'll often take lettuce trays and find a spot for them in the packing shed in a cooler area just until they germinate. Like they wouldn't have any light necessarily, but I'll stack them in there until they just start to germinate, and then I'll move them into the greenhouse.
So yeah, we have that. We have the landscape or shade cloth that we put on over the top. Also at the back here. So we didn't talk about that yet. So it's only the front half of the greenhouse that we heat. This back half here there's a sliding door here and that separates it. So we can, at night we close all the doors and just heat the front half. But the back half is our sort of hardening off area. So we'll take our plants, and you'll see actually there's two different kinds of plastic here. We've got some shade plastic. It's just a white plastic that takes some of the heat away, and because Louise does a lot of her work back here, it's just a shady area to work. And also then if we want plants to be a little cooler and a little bit not in direct sun, they can be in the back, in the first half of the back. And then we can also choose to put them at the very back here where it's regular plastic and it's a little bit warmer. So they'd be in an unheated part of the house, hardening off and with more sunlight on them. So some plants just do better if they don't sit under the shade too long, because sometimes that gets them leggy and they get too soft. And when then they get put out in the actual field, then they kind of get a bit of a shock from being exposed to those kinds of direct heat or direct sunlight.
Can I just ask about how what your method is for washing your trays when they're done? Or
yeah,
do you?
It's really easy. We don't.
You don't?
No, we don't.
Sweet.
We're too lazy.
I might adopt that.
So I never wash trays. The only thing I'm careful with is cucumbers, because we have a lot of cucumbers are the long English anyway are so prone to damping off. So I only use new trays, and I plant them in the 72 plug tray for cucumbers.
Yeah.
And I also don't put any compost in the soil mix. So it's like a sterile mix in a brand new tray. Other than that, I don't wash any trays. I'm not careful with trays at all, and it doesn't seem to be an issue. I tried washing trays once.
It sucks.
And then decided I was never going to do it again.
Yeah, so just looking at our trays.
And I just wanted to point out too that I've been taking the Master Market Gardener class from J.M. Fortier. I don't know if anyone else has been following it or doing any of his little workshops, but I was also very happy to hear that he never washes any of his trays either.
Yay.
Yeah, so we just saved everyone a pile of work.
Yay.
Yeah, anyway, so we have under this potting bench, which is right behind Louise's potting soil corner here, we've got all her different sizes of trays. These are all the used ones. So those are whatever these ones are, I can't even see. It looks like a 100, a 200, yeah. 200s. Can't even see what that one is either. But it's probably like 78 these are 98s. That's the most common one that we use. Yeah. So anyway, we got trays all along the edge here, all the different stashes of trays, and we try to use them as many times as we can. They of course don't last that long. They're not super durable, so we do have boxes of new ones here if we need to get new ones. We got them ready to go here as well.
Are
But
you
mostly we're
not
using a lot of
using-
our old trays as much as we can.
Oh.
Yeah.
Are you using the bottom trays as well? Like
Yeah. So some things like these guys here. You're talking about these trays? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we use that on mostly just for when we're doing flats, right, Louise? Is that when you're using them?
Oh yeah, and I never put the plug trays in basket trays. I don't know if that's what you were asking about. They just go
Yeah.
on the bench like this. I
Oh.
don't put anything. I don't put them in anything. But yeah, these are used for like seeding things that we're gonna, like the Celeriac for early on, the tomatoes or the peppers, things that go in rows, or parsley, the things that are gonna get pricked out later. Well,
Yeah,
that's
all the
what these are
onions
used
and the
for.
leeks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and then mostly the rest, any of the plug trays are just straight on the bench the way they are here. We can just take a quick look
Mm.
at the ones we have here.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
About getting the plugs out of the trays. Is there a trick to that?
Yeah, I sometimes if you get certain crops that don't make a nice firm root ball, and then they don't want to come out, and it's a bit fiddly. And so far I have not invested in one of these tray topper things. I've heard mixed reviews about them. I'm not sure. I was thinking of maybe getting a couple to see how they work. I think you can get them for the 128 plug tray. That where you have like a flat with little spikes coming out of the bottom, and you can just put your tray on it and it'll pop them all out. I haven't used one. If we have fiddly plants to work with, what we'll do is we'll sit there before, as we're transplanting, and we'll just take a chopstick, or sometimes a bolt works well too, and we'll just go along and poke them all from the bottom to loosen them up. It's a bit time consuming, but if we have to do it, that's the way we do it.
Yeah, so usually you want to have a plant, if you can, that will just come out on its own. But invariably you get some vegetables that just don't grow strong enough, and they have to come out and they have to be transplanted. So we'll just go along and loosen them all, and then plant them that way. Then they can come out. Where are you going with that one?
I was over there, but now
Okay. Anyway, so are there any other questions about this, the seedling production, or any of those techniques that we're using in here before? I'm not. Are you keeping track of the time, Rachel, of where we're at? I'm just thinking we
I
should
am.
probably
Yep.
leave a little bit
We're
of
good
time.
if we go for another half an hour approximately. And I think I just have a comment that I'm super impressed to hear that Louise is taking Jean-Martin Fortier's Market Gardener course, because I consider you guys the master gardeners who could teach a course. So it's really neat to see that you guys are continually learning as well.
Yeah, well, I think her main reason for doing it is just, yeah, it's a way of finding out what he's doing, or what they're doing there, and just comparing the techniques. Some of the things that he does we think are really good, and we could maybe adapt or adopt some of them, because they just think of things. Every farmer has some ideas that you could try to apply. Other things we think, oh, that's not the way we'd want to do it. It's way too time consuming. I think Louise has watched more of it than I have. But it's just been kind of interesting, right?
Yeah,
Or why did you decide to?
weighing down all your row covers with sandbags. I don't get why he does that.
Yeah. But what was your motivation to sign up for that course? I mean, it's not exactly inexpensive. Louise.
Oh, but because I just thought I would probably, like, you can always learn something new from someone who's got innovative ideas, and I'm definitely learning some some technique. But yeah, there are definitely, I'd say about a third of the things he does, I think, are too time consuming.
So maybe
what
we'll have
do
to
you
do a
guys-
combined course sometime. The best of his and the best of ours.
But he's so,
Um,
the other thing part of the reason I'm taking it too is because he is so high energy and enthusiastic and passionate. And so just watching him kind of gets you more fired up about what you're doing.
Yeah, because sometimes after having done it for 28 years in a row, you're sort of starting to, it just feels like it's getting a bit stale. So, having someone like that, that's a little bit newer to it, but has lots of interesting ideas, can kind of get you excited for another season. Yeah.
what do you guys use to weigh down your row covers then, if not rock bags?
Soil.
Just soil. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Right.
We just go along the edge and shovel a little bit of dirt on, and then when we pick it up, the dirt falls off.
Yeah.
It's because you don't have to move dirt around the farm. It's always right where you right where you need it.
Yeah. But part of that too could be sometimes techniques are different in different areas because of different conditions. And one of the things that I could imagine is that possibly in Quebec, you get a lot more wind, and maybe the soil technique isn't good enough. Whereas we don't get much wind here. It's unusual when it's windy, and our soil is pretty, like I said, heavier clay soil. So it doesn't. We don't have to worry about it blowing away. So the soil is much easier and faster. Okay, so let's just take a quick look. Actually, I just walked past one. Some of our cold frames. So they're very simple structures. Just like I said, a 20 by 100 house. The cost is something like 5,000 in materials, and then it probably takes you a week to put up or whatever on your own, or if you have a few people, it'll go a little faster. But yeah, they're simple structures. Basically, just a frame. We've chosen to add a little bit of extra strength to our frames and gone with. Usually they have round arches with round steel. We've gone with square steel. It's a little more expensive, but it has a little more strength because we've had an experience of some greenhouses collapsing under snow. So we're kind of wanting to do that. The other thing that we do that is an optional thing is at the top, you can see the bars that go across the top there. Those are extra, give you extra strength as well at the very top. While we're at the top, you can see there's a couple of things. Our irrigation system is from the top. So we run a 3/4 inch poly pipe along the top and have these little sprinklers here. I'll give you a close look. Trying to remember what the name is. I should know what the name is, but I can't remember it anymore, but you'll recognize them. Anyway, they're made in Israel, and they're really the best sprinkler there is that we've been able to find anyway. So they just hang down, and sometimes if they get plugged, you can take them apart and quickly clean them out and put them back again. Anyway, that's our irrigation system. It one line does right across the whole house. And yeah, so we've got, just to see what we've got here. These are our first generation of carrots. So, outside we would normally not even be able to seed carrots in a normal year for another 2 to 3 weeks at least. And here we have them already up. So we're going to get carrots out of our greenhouse really early, and be able to, cash in on that early market. Next to us here, we have the beginnings of spring mix ingredients. So seeded with a pinpoint seeder. This looks like it's kale at this end, and there'll be just different blocks. Let's go a little bit further, and there'll be a different block of a different material. Like this looks like arugula right here. And then we'll have red mustard and various other things all the way to the end of the greenhouse. And then we just harvest these. This will be ready to harvest probably in 2-3 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, I would say. Yeah. Yeah, they're cute little plants. And the reason we cover them Most of you probably are familiar with flea beetles. Anyone that's tried to grow mustard greens knows that flea beetles are a really nasty little pest. And so this mesh here is a fine mesh that is designed to keep the flea beetle out. And it's just the perfect thing for it. So that's why we have them covered. I don't see any flea beetles just yet, but maybe they're getting, oh yeah, there are some flea beetles. If you look very closely there, I don't know if you can see that. Those little black spots on the mesh, those are flea beetles. You can see the one there cruising across. Anyway, so that's a perennial problem with mustard greens.
Do you use that same mesh on your carrots ever, Herman, for the carrot rust fly? Or do you have that?
Yeah, we'll use it on the carrots too. It's just that the carrot rust fly isn't around just yet. So
Okay.
we can leave it off for now, and we'll do the first thinning and hoeing, and then we'll put it on, and then it stays on after that. And that one doesn't need to be quite so fine because the carrot rust fly is much bigger. So we use a coarser mesh that actually is a little bit more durable, because this fine mesh is not super durable, but it lasts us several seasons, and it's much better than Remay. Yeah.
And
So
I also wanted to ask where you bought your greenhouses from.
okay, yeah, good question. Yeah, so we got most of ours from a company in Calgary called Professional Gardener, and they get them made. The brand that they carry is Paul Boer's greenhouses, and they're made in Ontario, I believe. Yeah, and the reason we got them from there is because there used to be a rep for that company in Vernon, and he was very good at coming out and got us the best prices. Yeah, we didn't have to. Another thing, we don't have to pay taxes, and so the taxes are lower because you're getting it from Alberta, and he was very good at getting it for us. So yeah, we just went with all our houses from them. Now they don't have that rep anymore. He used to serve all of BC, and so they're kind of pulling back. So I don't know whether we're going to do as much. We probably won't do as much business with them anymore. But in the meantime, that worked quite well. They were always at least 15% less than the same house in BC. And just while I'm here with the irrigation too, we just use garden hoses to attach to our poly line here that then will run the entire irrigate the entire house in one go. Okay, any questions on that before I move on? Any other things? I'll get into a little bit into the door design too in a minute, because that's a little unique thing that we have as well. But we'll just go on to the next one here. So here you can see some lettuce and spinach. So you can see this lettuce is already basically ready to harvest. We could be harvesting it next week for sure, or later this week even. And same with the spinach. And this is both lettuce and spinach that was overwintered. So what we did is we seeded it in late September, and then we didn't harvest it or anything like that. And then it overwinters when the plants are small, not fully grown, just germinated, maybe like an inch or two high. They'll survive the winter quite well. And then in the spring, they're the first ones up, like they're just super fast and out of the gates. And so you can see right next to us over here, there's some spinach that we seeded this spring. So that's where this year's spinach is at that stage. Meanwhile, we've got stuff over here that we can already be selling. So that's a really handy little trick to be able to get even more of an early spring start from your cold frame or your unheated greenhouse with several of these crops. So we do this with lettuce mix, spinach, kale, the red Russian kale. We do it with cilantro. We do it with parsley and chives. Of course, chives are perennial, so that works well with them. We also do it with garlic to get some early garlic. And yeah, that's probably about it. I thought there was one more. Green onions. Yeah, we do green onions as well. I'll show you some of those later. Anyway, one of the other things that's unique about this particular house is Louise had mentioned that we have movable houses. And so this is one of our houses that is on skids. You can see that the arch is actually welded to it's an angle iron steel skid. And so we've got one of those on that side and on this side. So this house can be moved. And that's one of the cool things that we can do. So last fall, the house was over here. And you can see the remnants of peppers. So it had peppers in it in the fall. And when the peppers were done, we dragged the house over here. And we'd already seeded the lettuce mix and the spinach before we put the house, dragged the house over it. And so then the house was there in place to be able to protect and encourage early growth on the spinach and the lettuce mix. And then this spring, what we're going to do is these crops are going to be, they won't need the protection. As soon as we hit May, they'll be fine. We can just move the house off, move it back over here and put peppers in it. So that way, or something else, like we probably wouldn't put peppers in twice in the same year, one after another. We'd probably put something like long English cucumbers or something else like that here instead, just to create, have rotation. But what's cool about this is that it enables you to get 3 crops. You can basically get an early spring crop over here, and then you can get a summer crop over here, and then you can move it back out or back again in the fall and get a third late fall crop or early spring crop again over here. So it really makes it so that you can get a lot more bang for your buck for building one of these structures. So that's something that, and I can just show you over on the outside here is how we keep the house from blowing away. Of course, you have to anchor it somehow. So we have these pins that we use, that we drive in. They're rebar, and we pound them in. They're about 2.5 feet long, and there's at the ends we have 2 of them. But then after that, they're every 10 feet. We have one of those pins holding the whole length of the greenhouse from blowing away. And same on the other side. So in terms of moving it, it takes us about, 2 of us can do it in about an hour and a half. Just pull all the pins out. We put some ropes across the arches so that they don't splay out when we move them. And we put a tractor on either end, on either side, I mean. One on that side and hook one on that side and just pull the house in a straight line over to our next location. So that's a really handy thing to have. We have 2 houses that have that capability. This small one here, and then this large one that's right next to it. And while I'm on this, I'll just also point out our door structure because it kind of goes together a little bit. And that is, you can't move a house over a crop if it has an end wall in it. So we needed to design our houses so that they didn't have end walls. And also I just found that the cost of end walls was just another extra cost for a structure like this. And I wanted to always looking for ways of saving money. And also the end walls kind of obstruct airflow, because the other thing you'll notice is that none of our high tunnels have roll-up sides. We don't use roll-up sides at all. We just use our end wall design, which gives you really maximum airflow and access, and that's plenty for keeping the house cool. So we can save ourselves 2 ways. We can save money by not having to buy an end wall, and we can save money by not having to buy roll-up sides, which are kind of a pain anyway. And we still have a house that does the job. So I just wanted to show how these work. They're pretty simple. All it is I'll look at the top here, give you a quick view of the top. I don't know if it's going to be able to see that because you're kind of looking against the sun. I should go to another house to see that. Let me just move over to this other one here. Might be able to see it a little bit better. Yeah, there it's better. Okay, so you can see at the top there's a little piece of 2x6 with some bolts in it. It's bolted to the arch, and then each door, which is just a 2x4 basically coming down, is fastened to the top with one bolt, and that enables it to open like kind of like a curtain here. We're just sort of using it kind of like a curtain. You can see I just sort of undo the string and then the door closes like that. And we have at the bottom, we have a bracket where the door will fit into. It's hard to do with one hand actually. Anyway, it closes, it goes onto this little pin here, and then the door is closed, and I can make sure it doesn't come off by putting a little nail in the end like that, so it doesn't, the door can't come off. And opening them is really easy. Just sort of pull it open, and then there's a string on the end here that we use to tie the door up like a curtain, just like a curtain. Yeah, it probably doesn't look, so I should get someone else to do this actually, and then I'll get someone to demonstrate it. It's hard to do it and be filming it at the same time. Anyway, these doors, we've used them on all our houses just because they give us such good access. We can open them and you can see how easy it is. We can drive in with tractors. We've got really good ventilation through this house here. See that? And this one here's one that has both of the doors open over here. And it's a really simple design. We just use a door stake here. You can see the door stake a little bit better. Just drive a 2x6 in the ground and then screw this little bracket to it. And that's where each of the doors, as they close, come down to one of these brackets. Louise, do you want to just, I'll get Louise to demonstrate how to close the door. Can you just demonstrate how to open and close, or how to close the door?
Okay.
So here's one that's open. She's just going to take the string off that's holding it open like a curtain, and then closes it and hooks it on there. There we are. Puts the little nail in there to lock it in place so it doesn't pop off. And that's how easy it is to open and close the doors. And you get all this ventilation and easy access. Yeah. So
do you recommend both opening over just one side?
yeah, we definitely would. Just to get that airflow, you want to have them both opening. Yeah. Once you're building it, you may as well build it the same both ways. So this one, yeah, you can see them. It's just that sometimes we have one closed. If it's not that, it gives you the option too. If it's not all that cold, then, or let's say if it's not all that warm, you can just leave one door on either end open. But then in the middle of summer, we just open both doors and leave them open. We don't even close them in the middle of summer. So yeah, it gives you a few different options of things that you can do, or you can have both doors closed. Yeah, so what else can I just show you here? So this house has more spinach and lettuce mix in it. We've been harvesting this spinach already, so we've been selling it already last week. We sold some of it already. So it's pretty cool to have spinach available right at the beginning of April. Here's some of our cilantro that overwintered. Looks quite nice.
I have a question. What are your winter temperatures?
They'd probably be the same similar to what Nelson gets. So, hovers between +5 and -5 most of the time. And then every now and then you'll get a little cold spell, maybe go down to -15 or 20. So this house here has, you can see this is our garlic. And we plant it very close together because we're going to harvest this garlic as green onions, like in about the size of green onions, and sell them as if they were green onions, but we just call them green garlic. So it's just, people would use the whole plant before there's any bulbs. So you just eat the whole green, just chop it up like you would a green onion. So we'll be selling those probably in a week or two. And here we have parsley that overwintered as well. Again, this one we planted specifically just for the winter. So we planted them in September, sometimes even in October, and just stick them in, and they were transplants, and then let them sit all winter, and then first thing in the spring they're ready to roll. Whereas the ones that, the parsley that we're growing this year is just really, really tiny yet.
Herman, do you ever try that technique with carrots, like planting your carrots in September under one of these?
No, we haven't. I don't know if it would work. We should try it just for the heck of it, but I think it wouldn't work.
I think because there's been a couple farms I know. The farm in New Denver, Mick and Ruth's farm. They do it with carrots, and they have a really harsh winter up there, and so it's worked for them. So maybe try it.
Oh, we might have to try it. There you go. See, that's just the thing. Whenever you're talking to other farmers, they try something different that you just haven't gotten around to trying, or you just didn't think of. And
We do the carrots too, but we have a much more severe winter. We can get -25 up here at Fort Steele, so it's not consistent.
right, yeah.
But,
Yeah, we rarely get those kinds of temperatures.
Yes.
Just
So you
because,
might be able to do.
the Rockies and the Selkirks shield us from that, or the Selkirks and the Monashees. I mean,
Yeah.
you're getting them because it comes over the Rockies or comes down the trench, right?
Right.
One other thing that I can show you here. Let me just go over to this house. Might be just a little bit easier. So one problem too that lots of folks have with unheated tunnels is that quack grass wants to creep in from the outside. And so what we've done when we build them, we actually put a piece of flashing. So this is just galvanized flashing steel that we put along the bottom, and that keeps the quack grass from coming in. So it means we don't have to battle those, because the quack grass just loves to come in and start, each season it'll come in like 3 feet or something like that, and you're constantly battling it. So we did that for a few years and dug it out every year, and then we realized, okay, we got to come up with something better. And so that works really well. And then we use the wood to fasten the flashing to our poly lock here. This is what's holding the plastic down. Little poly lock channel, and we use this 2x2 to kind of sandwich the flashing between that and the poly lock, and it save us a lot of work in terms of quack grass coming in. Maybe I'll just go down to the end and show you a couple more little crops, and then, if there's are there any questions about some of the things that you're seeing, or
Herman, I had a question just about direct seeding. So I noticed you did most of your lettuce via transplants. You guys do a lot with transplants, including your beets.
Yeah.
Do you direct seed any of your greens?
Yeah. So today, actually, as soon as we're done here, I'm headed out, and I'm going to be seeding some spinach. I'll do a little bit of lettuce mix, and we'll do cilantro and dill and radishes. So those are kinds of some things that we seed pretty regularly. Beets and carrots, we seed those. We do some transplanting of beets too to get them a little bit earlier, but once we're in the main part of the season, we're just direct seeding them. Lettuce heads, yeah, we always transplant them like this. And here this is pak choi, actually. Nice little plants. And again, Louise is just covering them right now because the flea beetles, as we saw earlier, there are out and about, and they just love pak choi too. And we don't want them to start putting all kinds of holes in our pak choi.
And you use that same overhead irrigation in every hoop house.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this house, actually, all the other houses have it too, but there's another thing that I didn't show you earlier. As you can see, there's a wire with going right along the top, right along there, and then wires hanging down. So these wires that are hanging down are for trellising cucumbers and tomatoes. Those are the two main crops. So each of our houses has that set up in it as well, so that we can use each one as they, as we come to it. It's ready to be able to hang crops on them as well. Because all our long English cucumbers, we even pickling cucumbers now, we even grow those on trellises as well, like on a string. So we plant them individually in a row right under the line of hooks here, and then we'll run strings down and clip the plant to the string as it grows up, so that it'll go up the string, and makes it a lot easier to pick, and you get better fruit quality. Yeah, so we usually have at least 2 full houses of various different kinds of cucumbers: the long English, the mini cucumber, and the pickling cucumber.
Herman, can I ask you about the overwintering salad? Because we've kind of had mixed results trying to overwinter certain varieties. Like some I find go really bitter. So I'm wondering what varieties you've found that have worked for that.
Yeah, we don't. We don't really choose a different variety. What we're doing is we're just using the Johnny's mix. I think it's called the greenhouse mix. And you just seed the mix. And what our problem is, sometimes they don't do that well. Like we sometimes have some winter kill on it. Other years they're really good. So there seems to be always some winter kill. We haven't noticed anything about them going bitter. I mean, they will of course bolt quickly once you only get 1 or 2 cuts, and then they'll want to bolt. But that's why we have another generation coming in right after that. A new generation, this year's generation. So you can actually see right here, this house needs to be weeded pretty desperately, but I'll take you in close here. So here is some lettuce mix that was just seeded this year. So this will be what follows up after. So this is already basically the 3rd generation. Our first generation is the overwintered lettuce mix. The second generation was the lettuce mix that we planted out in that big house that I was showing you earlier on. So we just did transplants of lettuce mix and planted them pretty close, and we'll harvest them as if they were like lettuce mix. And then this is the next one, which is just germinating. So that way we have kind of a continuous supply and multiple different ways of getting it. You can see on this house as well, we got green onions that overwintered. They're looking a little ragged right now, but they'll grow out of it. Nice row there.
Do you find the drip line challenging? Like the just where you get that it condenses on the those kind of side purlins, I guess they are.
Yeah, you're right. They are purlins. No, we don't really have much of a problem with that. I mean, it does drip a little bit, but if you look at this purlin here, the way we have it lined up, it's going to drop right onto a pathway anyway. So doesn't matter to us. But yeah, you can see that there is some dripping. Actually, if you look right here, probably this little channel is drip, but that's where a pathway is anyway, so I don't really care. Yeah. More of an issue can be a hole in the plastic. So we try to make our plastic last as long as we can, but you can see, we use tape. I'll go around to the other side there to patch it. But those holes can be set, they can be lined up in a spot where it's going to drip right on the crop. But yeah, you just get a hole for whatever reason, something happens, maybe in snow removal, you put a hole in it or whatever. And so we tape them up, and it lasts a couple of years, then we have to tape it again. But we usually get about 8 to 10 years out of a sheet of plastic. So we kind of take it right to the limit. It can have a few holes in it. It doesn't matter to me that much. So this is the last house on our row of houses here. You can see looking back at the packing shed there, and just wanted to show you a couple of things in here. This is our overwintered red Russian kale. So there's a little bit of frost damage on some of the tips, but it'll probably mostly grow out of that, and we'll just sort those leaves out when we harvest. And there's another crop in here that I wanted to show you. It's Claytonia. And this is a crop that is very cold hardy, and we can harvest this even in December. It can freeze and then and yeah, right through the winter, as long as it's not freezing when we're trying to harvest it. And it's developing some little flowers now, but are still totally edible. And yeah, it's just a beautiful little sort of succulent plant, long stems with a leaf on the end. And it's very cold hardy, just loves dreary, you'll never get mildew on here like, you can in spinach or lettuce. It just loves and thrives when it's low light and moist and damp. That's what the conditions it likes the best. And so that's when it just starts taking off. It doesn't, so we don't seed it. We seed it in early September, late August, early September, and then we start harvesting it. It grows quite slowly, and then we'll start harvesting it in November and December. It just loves those temperatures. It just starts taking off at that point. And then it sort of goes a bit into hibernation over the course of the winter. So January, February, it's not doing much because it's just sort of, it's like a living refrigerator. If you've got it up to size, you can harvest it if it's not frozen. But if it isn't up to size, it's not going to grow anymore until you hit March, and then it starts taking off again. And you can see we've done a bunch of harvesting. I think we harvested 150 pounds out of here yesterday, and there's probably still another 150 in here. And then it's going to be done. It doesn't like the heat. It's already getting way too warm for it. So, but it's very handy to have, and I think it's a green that we should really start growing more of, because you can grow it in a house that is unheated and it's nutritious. And it's called Claytonia. It used to be, or it is actually a native that used to be called, or is called miner's lettuce. And it used to be eaten by people in the gold rush times. They'd find it growing in the forest along the coast, and it was high in vitamin C, and they didn't have a lot of good fresh vegetables at the time, so that was a real lifesaver for them. So now it's cultivated and much bigger and juicier, and yeah, it's a really cold hardy plant.
Are you direct seeding that one, Herman?
Yeah, we do both actually. We transplant it in one house. We had it, I think, in this house here actually. We transplanted it in this house. So we do both just to kind of cover our bases. Sometimes we don't get good germination when we direct seed it. So it's just nice to have a few beds of transplanted as well. But it'll grow either way.
And do you find it becomes, I mean, we used to grow it a lot, but we found it would just, self-seed so easily.
Well, we don't really let it get to that point because, it's looking like it wants to flower, or it is flowering, let's say right here, but it's not setting seed yet.
Okay.
And we'll be tilling it in the next day or two, so it's going to be gone.
Okay.
We don't let it get. Yeah, because we're seeding it late. It's only going to start flowering and going to seed at this time of year. And this time of year, we're going to be making room for all our other crops coming into these houses now. So these winter crops we're just getting what we can from them for a few more, a harvest or two, and then we just till them in and plant something else.
Yeah, it's such a great crop, that one, Claytonia.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's something that we really should, it's something that, especially when you're thinking about climate change and that here's a green that we could conceivably grow quite successfly in our area. But we just have to get lots of people interested in eating it instead of importing greens from California. Anyway, yeah.
Well,
Any
thank
other
you, Herman.
questions?
Yeah, that's been, we've been going an hour and 40 minutes now, and it's flown by as usual. I think it's just so neat to see the versatility of your greenhouses that are in your field, and knowing that, you're going to do your first crop of greens and such, and then it's going to transition to your warm loving crops such as your tomatoes and cucumbers and stuff like that, and that your structures are built in a way that they can be used for either crop. And I'm really impressed that your irrigation can also be used for either crop. So that's really interesting, some takeaways for me. And also just remembering how often you are seeding everything. Like you said, 2 to 3 weeks, you're seeding your kohlrabis and your lettuces and your brassicas and everything like that. Herman and I were chit-chatting just before the event, and I always say this to new gardeners just because it can seem it's a huge inspiration, but it was interesting to learn you already have 4 full-time employees working on your farm. So just so people know, this is huge, very large scale, and Herman and Louise do have some help at this time of year, and they are looking for more help to even ramp up for the full growing season. It is really impressive what you're accomplishing out there, Herman. And I know that managing your employees probably takes half your time, and organizing everybody for the day as well.
Yeah, it does become a business more about managing staff than growing stuff, and that's sometimes a bit frustrating for farmers. But yeah, this kind of farming, direct to market, and lots of different things, right? You have to do it all. It's all handwork, and so you need lots of hands to be able to get it all done. And so, yeah, that's just one of the realities of market vegetable farming. You're never going to be growing a big enough area to be able to get too mechanized, very mechanized, just because you're growing all these different crops, and a lot of them are just like one bed at a time, right? So there's not much point in getting too mechanized with it. We try to mechanize as much as you can that are things that are common amongst the different crops, but for each crop individually, it just takes a lot of hands to do it. And so that's why we need, and then all the packing and harvesting and for market takes a lot of time. So yeah, we just need a lot of folks to do it. And it's great. It's nice to have a team working, but it is challenging getting that team, keeping them happy, and yeah, keeping it all flowing in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you do plant such a broad diversity of crops. I was thinking that about your Celeriac and such. And do you find that overall you have such a strong customer base, not just because of the quality, but because of the diversity? Like, people are really excited to visit your farm stands and be your customers because you offer so much abundance?
Well, I think that's one of the key things that you need to. I think we learned that early on, actually, from one of the famous farmer that gave us the greenhouse, our first greenhouse. When we saw his market stand and realized, oh man, they're growing everything. And yeah, I mean, if you're going to spend the time and the effort to go to a farmer's market, and you only have 5 things with you, then you can each person that walks by your stand, you have only 5 things that you could possibly sell to them. But if you can have that same market stand and have 25 different things, then you just are going to be making more sales. It's just, it's a strategy, I think. I mean, there are some farmers that just focus on certain crops and they just try to get, a bag of carrots to everybody. Maybe that'll work too. But we found that the key to having a good market stand is having lots of diversity, especially in smaller markets. I think in a larger market, where then growers can sort of specialize a little bit. There's going to be a tomato grower, there's going to be a pepper grower, and maybe a root crop grower. But if you're going to a small rural market like we are in Salmon Arm and Revelstoke, there aren't that many growers there, and you want to be able to provide your customer the biggest possible diversity of vegetables to be able to find, and that gives you the opportunity to sell that many more items to each individual that walks by. So that's been our strategy, is always to kind of look at what do we run out of. Selling out is okay, but it's not really what we want to do, especially not selling out early. That's not a good thing. That's something that we really immediately flag as something that we have to fix. to grow more of that year if we can, just so that we don't sell out too quickly, because those are all lost potential sales if we sell out. So, you don't want to bring a whole bunch back either. So it's kind of finding that fine line of just, selling just about the right amount.
Yeah, amazing, interesting strategy, because I can see some crops require just a little bit more time and energy, but overall it's a good strategy to attract farm or visitors to your farm stand and into the markets, and also maximize sales when you have people's attention.
Yeah, and especially with a smaller market, if there aren't too many other growers around, people are going to be making decisions about whether they go to the market at all, based on what their chances are of getting the things that they're looking for. And so if you got them and you can provide them, then, and even later in the market, not just in the first hour, then you just gradually are going to build a clientele that can depend on you to have what they're looking for. So that's sort of what we've tried to do, and eventually what happens is then you just keep growing a little bit more, because you're realizing, oh, we're selling out of that, okay, we better grow a little more, and then you end up getting a farm size that's like ours, and unfortunately that comes with its own problems too. But yeah, 6 of one, half dozen another. You could have maybe the life would be not quite so stressful if it was if you were just growing for yourselves. There's times when Louise and I think, oh man, if only we were just the two of us, we wouldn't have to worry about all our staff. But in the end, it seems to work. So there's always some challenges.
Can I ask a question? And it's about getting people to work for you. Is housing a problem? Like, is finding places for them to live?
Yeah, housing is a problem. It's definitely, I think two of the people that considered taking on our greenhouse lead position probably might have made a decision not to come because of housing. And yeah, it's a real challenge. We do, yeah. So in order to try to mitigate that a little bit, we did purchase a house in Salmon Arm that we can then rent out to our staff. So that helps a little bit, but again, it's limited. There's only a few rooms in it, so we can't put all our staff in that house. So we really try to, as much as possible, find local people if we can. I mean, that solves the housing issue right there. But also, we do try to find help potential employees find accommodation by pointing them in the right direction. And yeah, so far we've been able to manage to make it work. There's always a few people that need find it, and or are coming from elsewhere and need to find housing, and they generally manage to find it. And then yeah, some we can put up in our house as well. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And it's getting to be more so, I find. There's just not much available, and it's all kind of getting more and more expensive too.
I have a question, Herman, about your deep affection for Local Line. Are you keeping on with Local Line for 2021?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I mean, certainly
I was being ironic.
Yeah. We've been using Local Line, and there's lots of things that work really well with it. We do have our frustrations with it as well, and I'm always hopeful that we'll be able to that the software developers will find some fixes to some of our frustrations. But in general, I have to say that we wouldn't be able to do the kind of online sales that we're doing without a piece of software like that. And I mean, I'm sure if I tried other ones, there would be other things that I would find frustrating about those. So we've kind of gone with Local Line. It has lots of features that really fit our farm and our kind of farming quite well, and at the same time also make work at farmers markets. So yeah, so far we're sticking with it. It's doing well. Our customers are liking it. they've just recently sort of upgraded their storefront end from the customer side, and so it's a lot more mobile friendly and user friendly. And so that side is working really well. On our end, sometimes I find it's a little bit, challenging. It just takes work. I mean, anytime you go to an online store, it's not quite like how they promise it. any online store maker, if you watch their tutorials, they make it sound like it's super simple. You just go on, and 5 minutes later, you got your products on there, and away you go. And it's just, the reality is just not like that. It takes a lot of work to make sure that all your product lists are accurate, that they're that the inventory, that's the most important part, is that the inventory is accurate, and you're not having things on there that you run out of. Like if you think that you're going to have, so just for an example, if we're going to a market on Wednesday, we open our store on Monday so that people at least have a couple of days, but we limit them to just 2 days, because we need to be able to predict on Monday what we're going to have on Wednesday. And sometimes we'll go out and say, oh yeah, it looks like we got 100 lettuce here. And then when you go out so that's on Monday morning, or even on Friday afternoon, you're looking at that and deciding what you're going to post on the store on Monday. And then you get out there and you start harvesting those lettuce, and you think, oh shoot, some of them have mildew. So now we're only going to have 85, but we've already had 100 listed on our store. And if I don't get back to the store quickly and change that, it might get sold, and then I don't have it. And so, we're constantly having to adjust inventory as we go along and discover, oh, we either have too little of something or more of something. And yeah, it takes a bunch of work. And then, there's also the work of packing all those orders. So all the customers that would normally just file past your market table and basically make all their own selections, now they're sending you a list of what they want, and you have to make all those selections. So you're doing the job of walking along the market table, set up in our packing shed. We set up basically like a market table in our packing shed, and our staff have to go along and pack all these, pick and pack all these orders. And, that in itself is quite a whole nother extra step of work. But having said that, we find that customers that order online tend to order more, because they can take the time to look through their fridge or see what they really need. They don't have kind of the sort of physical cue of where you're walking along a market table and your basket is getting heavy and you think, oh, that's probably enough. You don't use that when you're doing it online. You're just saying, you're looking at exactly what you need and say, okay, well, it is what it is, and I'll get what it is. And then it ends up generally being a little bit more, so people will have more time to kind of think about what they're going to need for the week or for 2 weeks in the winter. Yeah. So yeah, there's sort of, I think we're going to continue using it. I think our customers are telling us that some of them really, really like it, but they don't have to rush down to the farmer's market and hopefully, and may miss out on some of the more popular items that are just coming in, or that there's not a lot of. So this way they can just put in their order and then come down whenever they want and not have to worry they're going to get the exact same thing. So yeah, it has its pros and cons, and we'll see how many people stick with it after COVID. I mean, obviously the main driving force for us at this point was to create a low contact purchasing system. We couldn't tolerate the kinds of crowds that we used to have at farmers markets and in front of our market stand. I mean, that used to be, one of the fun things about the farmers market, is just feeding off the energy of the crowd. But now we can't have that. So using the online order system makes it so that we can, people don't have to rush down the crowd, and they can come at when they're ready and just come and pick it up. And it's very fast because all the work's done already. They just come, it's prepaid, they just pick it up and away they go. So it means that they're spending a lot less time in front of our market stand, and so you have fewer crowds.
Awesome, Herman.
You're sort of wondering about, or did I go beyond what you were asking?
No, it's super helpful, because it's just like a reflection. I mean, everyone was plunged into the online marketplace this time last year, and you out of anybody I know has invested the most time into Local Line specifically, which is a free resource to some farmers. And so it's just interesting to hear your reflections on how that platform's working for you after a year. I know it's been a challenge for everybody to kind of adapt, and there's some wins and there's some losses. So it's just neat to hear your reflections. So I do appreciate that. And, you know, I feel like there's a lot of farmers who have used other platforms, and, you know, one day we can have a roundtable on all the different ones out there. And Nairi Marsh, who's on the call with the Basin Business Advisor Program, she's sort of been culminating all these experiences out there. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
Well, I think one of the things that sets Local Line apart, and that's why the BC Association of Farmers Markets adopted it, is that it has this possibility to bring whole farmers markets together under one store. So that's something that, you know, is not that most, I don't think if there's any other platform that can do that. So that's one of the reasons, and it's a Canadian company, that's also an interesting thing. It's kind of cool. So yeah, but yeah, every platform, I mean, anyone that I've talked to has had their challenges with the platform that they're on, and yeah, and some of them have advantages and disadvantages. So yeah, who knows which way to go, but you just pick one and sort of try to work with it, and there's different ones that have different strengths, and you choose one that has, I think that's where Local Line has the strength of being able to be really adaptable for farmers markets. And so
Awesome.
I think
Thank
that's, you know, the real drive to use it. And of course, the fact that the BC government has been subsidizing the use of Local Line for anyone that's going to farmers markets. So it's a great way of actually trying it without having to pay the $600 a year to use it.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Herman? We are at 3 o'clock here, so I just wanted to be respectful of Herman's time and also make sure that anybody who had some itching questions, they could ask them now, but you can also email Herman or email myself, and we can always get these questions answered at a later time as well. No, well, if not, Herman, it's so great to speak with you. Thank you so much for sharing. You know, just in saying that, I forgot what a pickle all these farmers were in this time last year, not knowing what the growing season held in store for everybody. I feel like everyone is a little bit more at ease right now, but still, it's still a pandemic. And so hang in there, everyone, with your staff and rules and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully we can anticipate that our farmers markets are all going to flow as seamlessly as possible this spring, not the chaos of last spring. So thanks everyone for coming, and we're always open to new topics. Herman, I will get you a selfie stick for the next farm tour. Your arm must be losing sensation now. And yeah, thanks again, guys. And we're always open to new topics. If you want to learn any more that's happening on Herman's farm or other people's farms, you know, Herman had suggested that this tour actually be 3 different farms sharing their seed starting techniques, because everyone has their own tips and tricks. So this is something we can keep playing with as we virtually tour around British Columbia.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool concept. And thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate all the questions. That was really nice to be able to respond to those and try to answer them as best we could. And yeah, hope you all have a good season. I think this is definitely going to be a much more sort of predictable season than the last one was at this time of year for sure. So yeah, I think it'll be better, but it'll no doubt have its own challenges. So that's farming.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Herman, and bye everyone. Nice to see everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.